Howdy all you delicious people, I'm here today to review Hot Fuzz. So, this of course is a movie that's conveniently available on Tubi right now, Tubi. Really, you can go onto that app, download it, and be able to uh, see a variety of movies and shows and stuff like that. You wouldn't be able to see anywhere else. Like, I've gone on and seen like Double Dragon or Double Dragon. And I've seen like Inspector Gadgets and all kinds of wild and crazy stuff. I'm like, oh my god, like I can't believe that Tubi has this. And there's just a lot of interesting, unique movies like Condemned and stuff like that that I saw on Tubi. So yeah, wild variety of interesting movies. All you need to have is like a Google account. You can pretty easily go on to Tubi and be able to see absolutely everything for free. There's no fees of any kind. So, with that said, what is Hot Fuzz? So, Hot Fuzz, of course, is to be like another like buddy cop, literally comedy, where we have Simon Pegg and Nicholas Frost like teaming up together again. Because we've kind of seen them, and by this time of this movie, we've kind of already seen them in Shaun of the Dead, and we'll go on and see them in like The World's End and stuff like that. So there could be possibly other kind of movies that they have gone on and done together at some points, like the Slaughterhouse Ruled, or possibly some other um, Paul, like the Alien movie. So yeah, going into this film, we of course have Nicholas Angel, who is to be a cop that is way too good at his job to the point where it seems that his superior is wanting to take this man and transfer him elsewhere. Because it's like, well, hey, like, you're so good at your job to the point of like crime being up 400% because you've gone on and like you've arrested everybody. So Nicholas is to be forced to go to Sanford after like London no longer wants him in this precinct, in this department. So Nicholas is to go on, and after talking to a number of different superiors, after talking to his direct superior, and like thinking that there is a way to kind of stay in London, but we'd find out that that would be wrong. Nicholas is to go on to a place called Sanford to then have to have a much slower crime rate, and so Nicholas is kind of forced to go on and have fun, go on and try and figure out a way to turn his brain off, even though he is to of course tell his newly partner, Danny, that he doesn't think that he can know how to turn off his brain. So yeah, so we have like Nicholas who's starting to just go stir crazy because there's just not enough going on in this town. And so Nicholas starts to go on and starts to drink and starts to watch movies and like we could have really seen that this guy could have really just burnt out here and could have gone on and just realized like, hey, could you just transfer me somewhere else? Like, there's nothing going on here. So, but all of a sudden, Nicholas is to slowly but realize that there seems to be a huge pile of accidental deaths, and those accidental deaths lead to Nicholas wanting to not rule it out as murder, so that way they have something um, more interesting within this town. And more, it seems like these bodies keep piling up, to where it seems that Nicholas is desperate to try to come up with this connection. And so it seems like at the end of this movie, we kind of are spoon fed a lot of things to then go on and have Nicholas figure things out. So, so with that said, I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really fun. It may not be as funny as other kind of Simon Pegg, Nick Frost movies, um, but like these movies are always to be like very like dry. Um, like it's always like dry humor, and that's kind of like the most interesting kind of humor because we laugh about it, but then we're like man, like it's so fascinating how like they approach the way they do things, and like Shaun of the Dead, like I found myself like the very first time around like laughing so hard at that movie, and I was like, man, like this is a different kind of style of comedy that I'm used to, but like man, was it just so like it was so good, especially when we had them going on and explaining about where they were gonna go to feel safe, where they keep rattling on every single time of where they're going to head, and eventually it always ends up like, oh yeah, we're gonna have this. We're gonna go to this bar because that's where we have safe, and it has beer there. It's like, oh great, like they always go the exact same lineup, and it's like, oh, and they just keep adding things, like as if this is some weird grocery list of what they have to go on and do. So, with that said, I think I'm going to go and do the spoiler variation of this film. So, I'm going to try to do this as best as possible because I think this has like a different kind of weird order of characters. So, if anything gets a little confused, it's kind of really interesting the cast that are kind of playing on the villain side because at some points you kind of have like the who's who. You have like Timothy Dalton, who of course is to have played like James Bond. Like, yeah, he only played it for a couple movies, and plus he was also on Doom Patrol. And so yeah, it was kind of cool seeing him here, as well as kind of Stuart Wilson, who a lot of people will probably have seen him in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, like the time one where they go to feudal Japan, and like he's the villain of there, and like uh ugly lump of dumb and all that kind of weird goofy stuff. Um and the Reverend in this movie of course is from Indiana Jones. He plays the villain in that movie. Kind of a lot of like heroes and villains when it comes down to it within that side of things. But anyways, let's just go into spoilers. Let's do that double five time up because it's about that time to just go on and say as per usual. It is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time I get to spoil this movie. So it seems the IMDb cast list is to just kind of showcase for the most point, not all of it, but it kind of shows when people kind of like show up in this movie. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, that could be a good thing, but then a bad thing because they always want to go back to kind of the bigger person who is consistently within the movie. So we go on and we have Nicholas Angel, who of course is Simon Pegg here, and they have to go on and build Nicholas up as this like top cop, and like for like if you went on and saw a number of action movies of like the cop films where or the detective films where like the top cop is like good at everything kind of guy where he's going on and doing things so well that he has to turn around and like teach other people how to do things. That's kind of what Nicholas is doing. It seems that he is really good at driving and bicycling, and I think he's like a top marksman and like all of these things. Toward Danny, when Nicholas is to get into town, he's so desperate to just be like, man, like can I just see like some kind of something of your past to kind of just show like that this guy is as good as it seems like his paperwork says that he is. So Nicholas goes on, and there's this huge rap sheet going on and saying that like crime is now 400% just because of Nicholas being the guy who is to arrest everyone. So for one reason or another. So Nicholas, of course, is to report to his superior, his Met sergeant, and so Nicholas is talking to his Met sergeant and saying like, well, it seems like you kind of like arrested so many people that like it seems like the only thing that we can really do here is just promote you. But sadly enough, like there is no need for you being promoted within London. So you need to go on and go to like Sanford. And Nicholas is like, no, like I don't want to go to Sanford. Like if anything, I would be fine going with Sanford like 20 years from now, but not today. So the Met Sergeant is just like, well, I'm sorry, Nicholas, but like that's all we can have you do. And Nicholas is like, well, wait a minute, like, can I just be like a normal like police officer? Like, can I just stay here like a police cop? And the Met Sergeant is like, well, no. And Nicholas is like, well, why? And because the Met Sergeant is like, well, because like we just at this point we just want to get rid of you. And so Nicholas is going on to be like, well, hey, can I go on and can I speak with your superior? And so we then go on and, of course, have Nicholas, who's going to speak with the Metropolitan Police Inspector, and he goes on and talks to him and says, like, yeah, like we really need to transfer you. So we then go on and have Nicholas, who's talking to that man's superior, who is the Met Chief Inspector, and the Met Chief Inspector is like, well, yeah, like, we need to have you transfer elsewhere because you're making all of us look bad. So, like, you need to go somewhere else. Like, you need to go to a place where there isn't crime so, like, we can go on and do our job. And so Nicholas is like, well, like considering all of you feel this, I'm gonna go on and like and take an opinion that I think is gonna be the most crucial, and I'm gonna go on and like get the opinions of all of my uh, all the people that I've worked with, all the people in the station. And so Nicholas goes on and opens this door, and they have this huge banner that says "Good luck, Nicholas," and everybody's having this party of him leaving, and so Nicholas is like, "Oh my god!" So Nicholas is like, "Well, okay, I guess I'm just gonna go on to Stanford or Sanford then." So all of a sudden we have Nicholas who is to go on and try and talk with Janice, who I guess is this like CSI, one of those kind of characters who is to have all these kinds of like protective gear on and so on and so forth. And so Nicholas is now going to the place where Janice is at, and so he's like calling her on the cell phone, and they keep having this like runaround about what's going on with her case and what's going on between them. And so we have Nicholas explain to Janice that he is, of course, to transfer to Sanford, and Janice is like, well, hey, that's great because like I really need to break it to you that like I've gone on and I'm dating someone. I'm dating someone else. And Nicholas is like, really? And she's like, yeah. And so she goes on and mentions who it is, and he's like, oh, hey, hi. Like, so of course we have it like that. And Nicholas was to also like considering all of these characters all looked the same, but Nicholas was to try to like talk to Janice, and we had one guy who's like, "I'm not Janice," and so Nicholas is like, "Oh, okay." So he like turns, and then he immediately like is to realize that the person next to him is Janice. So yeah, like Nicholas basically gets dumped here, and so now he's going on and taking this plant, and we had a speech that Nicholas is to give to Danny at one point, mentioning that it seemed that Janice was thinking that Nicholas loved this plant of his more than he loved Janice, because he's like watering it every day and taking care of it every day. And so Danny is like, "Well, what are you effing your plant?" So Nicholas is to make his way. Nicholas. Every time I'm saying the word Nicholas, I'm thinking of that like Nick Schwartzen, like stand up where he has this one bit where he goes on, and I think he ends up talking to his grandmother, and Nick is going and kind of lifting up these chairs and doing all these like things that of course his elderly grandmother can't do. And so like the elderly woman is like, "Nicholas, you should fight crime." For how he like lifts up this furniture, or lifts up this table, or lifts up this chair. And the elderly and the grandmother's like, "Nicholas, you should fight crime." Anyways, so so Angel, we'll call him Angel, so I can stop thinking of the whole Nicholas bit. So Angel goes on and is to make it into this town, and immediately once he makes it into this town of Sanford, I don't know why I have to keep naming the town as if it matters. All of a sudden, Nicholas is, of course, not fighting crime, but going into a bar. And so we have both Roy and both Mary Porter that are in this bar, and Angel is to start the very next day. But all of a sudden, we have Angel who is getting this like cranberry juice, and Angel is kind of looking at this bar and noticing it seems that there is a plethora of guys that, of course, are all way under the age limit, and like as if they're in high school. And so now Angel here is starting to go around the bar and is to start to question, like, "When's your birthday?" So the one kid is like, "Well, it's February so and so," and we of course have like Angel who's like, "Well, what year?" And the kid's like, "Well, every year." And so it's like, that's not what I'm saying, kid. So we go on and we start to have just Angel just plucking a ton of these young kids who obviously aren't like 18 or 21. They're much younger than that. And so Angel is to go and kick every one of these kids out of this bar. And now both Roy and Mary are just like, "Well, why did you do that?" And we, of course, have Angel who's like, "Well, I'm the new acting sergeant for this police. And I'll be active tomorrow." But like obviously all of these kids are way underage, and they're just like, "Well, like, well, really, that's not a real problem here. It's like, hey, getting them off the streets is kind of more important, and it's just the greater good." And Angel's like, "No, I don't see it that way." So Angel is to go on and notice that, of course, uh, like Danny, who Angel doesn't know him quite yet. So Danny all of a sudden is getting out of the bar, and he's just kind of, "Ugh." So Danny is to start to get into this car, and Angel is like, "You're seriously not going to drive that car, are you?" And Danny's like, "Well, no." So Angel all of a sudden is to kind of walk off, and he almost gets ran over by this car that, of course, Danny was driving in. And so now Angel is going to arrest Danny and bring him in. So all of a sudden, Angel, by the time he gets to this precinct, he has like 5 or 6 young kids, and he, of course, has Danny, who he arrests. So he arrests all these guys and goes on and has them be booked in all these cells and so on and so forth. So Angel's feeling good. He goes to his hotel where we have this woman who's this kind of like hotel keeper, and she's doing crosswords. And so it seems like this stuff that's kind of coming up between both Angel and both this like hotel clerk are like crossword puzzles. And so we have Angel that goes to his apartment. Like Angel, when he was making his way to Sanford, I think they were mentioning at some points that his like his place wasn't ready, and so on and so forth. So Angel goes on and he is to make it into the precinct, and he goes on and is to check the cell that supposedly Danny's in, and the cell's empty. And so Angel is to go on and be like, "Hey, like this guy that was in the cell is now missing." And so Danny walks in there. He's like, What guy?" And so Angel is to realize that Danny is now in a police uniform, and Angel is to go on and say, it's like, "Well, hey, why are you in police uniform?" And Danny is like, "Well, because I'm a policeman." And so it's like, oh my god. So Angel goes to meet with his superior, and his superior is Inspector Frank Butterman. So we find out that it seems that Danny is to get a lot of leeway because his father is basically the head of this department, or head of this precinct. So it seems that Danny is to go on and get berated for all the crimes that he does by forcibly buying a bunch of other people at this precinct like cake or ice cream or whichever. And I'm like, that seems like a bizarre reward. We also, before Angel is to make it to his first day of work, we all of a sudden have Angel, who's starting to meet with everybody in the town, and they're referring to him as Sergeant Angel or Sergeant or whichever. So we go on and we have, of course, Angel, who is kind of just jogging along, meeting the Reverend, meeting Dr. Robin Hatcher, and all these kinds of other people. And so we all of a sudden have Angel, who bumps into Simon Skinner, and Simon is to mention, it's like, "Well, hey, I'm a slasher. You need to book me now." And Angel's like, "Well, say what? Say what?" And so Simon's like, "Yes, I'm a slasher. I slash prices." Because we have Simon Skinner, who goes on and he is to work this like general goods store, or this like grocery store. And so he continues to like make like these jokes that are like related to like what he does, but also that he should be arrested because his prices are criminal and all this. And I'm just like, oh my god, like this opening scene with Simon and Angel was freaking hilarious. I laughed because it was just so goofy. Like, this guy was like, "You need to arrest me because I'm a slasher." And Angel's like, "Say what now?" He's like, "I'm a slasher of prices." Like, only a retail person would go on and, like, have this kind of sense of humor, because a lot of people probably don't like their job, so they would probably make fun of it. They would probably just be like, "Yeah, like, all the deals that we're making is ludicrous and crazy." Like, like, it's kind of like Biodome, if anybody's remember that Pauly Shore movie, where it's like, "We're crazy boys, we're giving it away." So we go on and we have Angel, who's meeting up with, of course, Frank, and everybody's eating all these pies. And Angel has no interest in eating pie because he wants to kind of remain fit, because I'm sure his body is a temple, because it seems like when he goes to a grocery store, it seems like he's going to the organic section. So I'm like, oh, so he's one of those people. He's one of them. He's one of those. It is what it is. If you eat organic food, it's probably just because you're a healthy person. Anyways, so we go on further into this movie, and so Inspector Frank is kind of showing Angel around here, showing him to all the other kind of defectives. They are kind of defective in some way or another. So we go on and we have Frank that kind of shows of course, um, Angel to Tom Weaver, who we find out, like, Tom Weaver is kind of like the neighborhood watch, and this guy weirdly has all this surveillance all over town, and Tom is to have this bizarre thing for this guy called the living statue, and like they like weirdly we have Tom who's like, "Yeah, this guy is spending way too much time like within this one area. Like, I think we need to arrest him for something, because this guy just has a hard on for this living statue guy, and he just needs him arrested for some bizarre reason." So we go on here and we eventually have certain people who are one way or another starting to get killed, starting to be taken out within this town. And so that all of a sudden is to start to go on and have people get very, very uneasy, very suspicious, so on and so forth. So the very first character, of course, who is to go down here, of course, is to be a couple called Martin Blower and Eve Draper. Because we go on into this story, and Nicholas is to have a speeding ticket for Blower, because, of course, like, he is to have a reasoning of like, well, hey, like, I was speeding because I needed to go to this Romeo and Juliet play, and I'm late. And Nicholas is going on writing everything down to the point of Blower just going on and like, it's like, stop writing what I'm saying. And so Nicholas is like, well, I have to write down everything that you're saying, because I'm going to use it against you in a minute here. So Nicholas is going on and saying that it's like, okay, so you needed to, like, speed to make it to this play. Like, does that really seem like an emergency? Does that seem like something you desperately need to go on to exceed the speed limit? Because we just have both Nicholas and both Danny here that are going on and just kind of monitoring speed limits at this place because they have nothing to do. It just seems like they have to forcibly go on and just go grocery shopping, where again they meet up with Simon, and Simon's like, "Oh yeah, like I noticed you in the organic section of the groceries, and like I thought I would go on and have you come in here and we can meet again. And like, oh my god, like my price is a criminal. Sure. So yeah, so fortunately later, we have Nicholas and Danny who go back to the precinct, and they do all this write up about Blower. And so it seems that Blower is to go on and give these two tickets for Nicholas and Danny to go to his show. And Nicholas instantly tears him up because he can't get some kind of like he can't get some kind of thing from a person that they technically wrote up. It's just against like procedure or whatever. And so we of course have Inspector Frank that goes on and is to tell both Nicholas and Danny to turn around and go to this Romeo and Juliet play anyways because it's to represent the precinct. And so Nicholas is like, okay, sure, I'll go. So we go into this Romeo and Juliet play, and so 3 hours, of course, are to pass. And supposedly they say that the only thing that was really convincing was the kiss between Martin Blower and Eve Draper. And so after the play, they go on, and Nicholas to ask Blower here if like this is to actually be his wife, and Blower is like, well, no, like, and so we have Nicholas who's like, okay, that seemed kind of weird because it seemed like both of them were actually lovers. So we have Nicholas, and we of course have Danny, who had this one last talk with Blower, mentioning about him driving safe. And so Danny like kind of turns to Nicholas, is like, yeah, drive safe. Yeah, I get that pun. So all of a sudden, Blower and Draper are going into this one room together because they are, of course, having this a love-making session, to be interrupted by this weird Reaper-looking character that is to go on and kill them both. We had weirdly Simon, who goes on and is to mention weirdly to Draper that he would love to go and bash this girl's head in to like open all the secrets and all this information that is to come out of this girl's head. It's a weird, goofy saying, and like they use that later on as far as like possible like the way of which that this guy is to talk is just to feel very bizarre. So all of a sudden we go on and we find these people's heads out in the road somewhere, and so immediately they're writing it off as an accident. And so Simon, of course, is like, well, no, I'm not going to write it off as just some accident. Like, it's possible that it's a murder, but we're kind of like there isn't any real hard evidence of that. So all of a sudden, we have Simon who's driving by, and he, of course, is just kind of mentioning like some stuff here and there about the Romeo and Juliet play, and so on and so forth. And then he goes on and he just continues to drive off, and Nicholas is just like, God, there's something that makes my skin crawl about that guy, but I can't quite put my finger on it because that's what it seems like Nicholas is feeling at this point, but he just can't go on and say anything further. So, but we consistently have Nicholas that is going on and hoping that these detectives, like these guys with these suit and ties, these real like detective guys, are to go on and try to find something that is to tie to a murderer, but these consistent detectives are to come to Nicholas and say that they have bubkiss, that they're just going to write it off quickly as an accident, so like they can just be done with this case, and that just continues to happen. So we then go on and have other people who are to eventually at some point get this thing called killed. So we then go on and are, of course, to have a guy named Arthur Webley who is to mumbly mention that it seems that he has a cluster of guns and an unusual amount of weaponry in some shed somewhere. And so it seems that the police department is to collect every single one of these guns. And it seems that one of the mines was almost to go off because they heard a ticking. And so all the guys was assigned to run out of the shed because they assumed that this room was going to explode that they were in. Come to find out that this mine, I guess, was deactivated, and so they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll just collect all these guns, and like that will be the end of it. So we then push on, and weirdly enough, we have it to where actually Peter Jackson is in this movie as the guy who is dressed as Santa, because the one thing that I kind of forgot to explain is that Nicholas at one point was stabbed in the hand by a guy dressed up as Santa Claus, and so we have Nicholas who goes on and is to wear this kind of shield upon him to prevent him from going on and getting stabbed. And a lot of the other like detectives are kind of mocking Nicholas here because it's like, well, why are you wearing this protective thing to try to prevent you from getting stabbed? Like that just seems like a stupid thing to do. And Nicholas is like, well, like, have you ever been stabbed? And they're all like, well, no. It's like, well, I have, and it hurts. Like, it hurts really bad. So, like, that's the reasoning for me to go on and, of course, wear this guard so that way I don't get stabbed because, of course, of how painful it is. So, consistently in the early stages of this movie, we also have Danny that is consistently asking Nicholas all of these questions, like asking him like if he's ever been in a high speed chase, has he ever fired his gun in high speed chase, has he ever gone on and shot someone, and so on, like all these rattled on questions and all these several things, and so Danny is to even have uh, asked a question during this whole like time where Nicholas is off at the school, going and talking to people about policing and stuff like that. And so Danny goes and asks the question. It's like, is it true that you can go on and shoot someone a very specific way and their brain explodes? And we go on. We have Nicholas is like, no. So Nicholas is go on and take this picture, and so we of course have this one Tim Messenger guy that is to start asking certain goofy questions to the point where really like the news reporter goes on and asks Nicholas at one point, it's like, what do you think the perfect Sunday would be? And like it doesn't seem like it's the actual day, it seems like it's the dessert. And so like we go on and we have people at some points who are asked this question oddly, and so they have to go on and like, well, I think the perfect Sunday would be this and that. Like weird goofy questions. So we have another death piling up, so let's talk about it. So we, of course, have a guy named George Merchant, I believe, who, of course, is to be with both Simon and Danny as they're at this bar and they start heavily drinking. Finally, Nicholas is to kind of let loose and is to start to drink. So it seems like this guy is kind of peeing all over the bar, so they decide to take him home. And so they go on and take this guy home, and so he's like falling all over the place. And to where once they like put him in his house, like he falls all over the place in this house. And so both the guys just kind of go on and leave, and they're like, well, hopefully this guy's okay, because we're just gonna get out of here. So both of these guys are going on, and they are both uh, making their way to Danny's place. And so Danny and Simon, or God, I want to just keep calling him, I want to call him Simon Pegg here. We have Danny and Nicholas who are having this talk about that Nicholas just needs to turn his brain off, and Nicholas, of course, is saying here that he doesn't think he can. So Danny is to go on and show him his big, huge, massive collection of films that seems to take up a room of almost a walk-in closet. So Danny is to go on and grab Point Break and grab Bad Boys 2, because of course Danny is to have asked Nicholas if he was to go on and see either one of these films, and Nicholas is like, well, of course not. So because at one point Danny is to ask like Simon if he's ever like fired his gun in the air from out of anger and saying and so Nicholas is like, no, I've never fired my gun in the air and said like no. Like who does that? So we have it where Simon or Nicholas and Danny are watching Point Break, and we have Danny who's like, well, hey, how was that? And Nicholas is going on and saying, it's like, well, you know what, that was actually a pretty good like action movie, but like from a realistic standpoint, like this would leave these guys just so like knee deep in paperwork that it's just like, what would be the point of all of that? So we have it where, of course, we have George, who's at this bar, who is to now get killed. So it seems like we're setting up that this guy is to go on and weirdly have this like breakfast all being prepared. Like he's having this toast being put in this toaster, bacon is being made, all kinds of craziness. And so this guy ends up getting his whole entire house like exploded, and he then dies. And so, of course, both Angel and both Danny had fallen asleep, and they've fallen asleep while watching Bad Boys 2. Weirdly enough, it sounds like there may never be a Bad Boys 4. Yeah. Because I think there were in like production, or there was a possibility that there was going to be a Bad Boys 4, but it seems with what's kind of going on lately, yeah, that seems like it's never going to be a thing anymore. Or maybe they're just going to reboot something or go on and do something differently, right? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. So we then go on and have these guys get the phone call that there's another there's another accident, not another murder. So immediately we have it where like Nicholas is like, well, obviously this is a murder, like, and like there's too much about this. Just this kind of seems like far too fetched of why this guy would have so many things going on in his house all simultaneously to go off into this explosion. It makes no sense. And they're just like, well, no, like this has to be an accident. So it's just like, well, okay. So we are to, of course, have Simon, or we of course have Angel here, uh, Nicholas, who is now forced by his superior again to go on to a certain part of town to then be at this kind of like fair kind of thing where he is to go on and at some point is to name off certain names who are getting some raffles. And so Nicholas is to go on and is to kind of wait and kind of sit around. And so while they're at this kind of fair and this raffle moment, we have Danny pushing Nicholas here to go on and do this like shooting range thing. And so this doctor is to kind of be the guy that's kind of manning this whole thing. And so Danny's pressuring Nicholas to go on and shoot this range thing. And so Nicholas goes on and easily is to fire every single one of these little targets to get this big massive monkey. So we have Nicholas going to like make his way to name off all these like these raffles with these people's names in it. So all of a sudden we have Tim Messenger who is desperately wanting to go and talk with Nicholas about that he's kind of learned some very important information and like he wants to go on and tell Nicholas here about this. So Nicholas is like, well, okay, like I gotta go on and do something, and then we can go on and meet. And so while Nicholas is starting to rattle off these names, and one of them, of course, is Tim Messenger, the guy that he was supposed to meet, and the other, of course, was Simon Skinner, who neither one of them are technically there. So all of a sudden, we have Tim Messenger that is just kind of waiting for Nicholas, and while he's waiting, all of a sudden there seems to be one little piece of this building that is to go and fall over on top of Tim here and is to kill him off. And so now we have it where Nicholas is like, dude, like, there's too many people who have died now via accidents. Like, there's no way that this is just some weird coinkydink. So we go on and we're like having at this point where really Nicholas just wants to figure out the connection. He just wants to figure out why this is going on at this point. And so he can't figure it out. He doesn't understand really what's actually going on here. And so, like, we have this guy consistently who doesn't really quite understand. So we get to where it seems that it's Danny's birthday, and Nicholas is asking Danny, it's like, well, hey, why didn't you tell me it was your birthday? And Danny's like, well, because we were working, we were trying to figure this out. So Nicholas goes off to this flower shop to go on and buy Danny the same flower that Nicholas is to have because he was kind of telling him like, hey man, like it's very little maintenance. It's kind of like it's kind of a thing to do, and so on and so forth. So all of a sudden, Nicholas is talking to a woman that I guess is to be a relative of Simon's, and so this girl is all of a sudden talking about that she is going to move. And Nicholas is like, okay, well, that's weird. Like, you have this flower shop, and all of a sudden you decide, like, right off the bat, you're just moving? Like, why? So, this girl's to mention that it seems that she had figured it out, that there is just a bunch of people that, like, surprisingly have all been kind of accidentally killed, and it all has something to do with Simon desperately either wanting to weed out the competition or to really just kind of go on and like want to just buy off that land to have this big massive store of sorts. And so because like we really just wanted like Simon to really just weed out the like his other store here. So and to where Simon at some point is to have mentioned when he's kind of questioned about this is like, well, no, like I seek no ill will to any of my like competitors. Like if anything, uh like it just kind of makes my coworkers a lot more motivated. So once Nicholas is to realize that it seems like this is all like a hunt for like land or hunt for like trying to seek out these things and to kill all these people off because of it, all of a sudden we find out that there is some masked Reaper character who is to put gardening shears into this girl's throat. And so now Nicholas is chasing after this guy, and it seems that this guy that he's chasing after, or this person, is to be far too fast for him. And no matter what he does, no matter how many things he leaps over and flips over and all this stuff. We had one moment where Nicholas was going on and chasing after this one like store thief who is shoplifting. So I'll call him a shoplifter because that makes a lot more sense. So, because we have it where Nicholas was talking to Skinner here, and he notices that this shoplifter, and so all of a sudden that has it where now Nicholas is chasing after the shoplifter, and of course this shoplifter is to wear this like weird purple jumpsuit kind of thing. So we we go on and have it where Nicholas goes and captures this guy and books him after all of this running around, and he's like, oh, mothers. And then like we have a group of all mothers that are having all these babies and like in these strollers. And so we go on and we catch this guy, and then so Simon turns around and he mentions it's like, well, like I'm not going to press charges on this guy because I think I think he's learned his lesson. Like I think like I can't just go on and have this guy be punished for this crime. So we go on, and so Simon is to chase after this other man, this masked man, and he does not come up with him. So we finally have it where Nicholas is to come up with a culprit who he thinks is to actually be this masked man. And he naturally assumes, Nicholas does, that this is Simon, because it makes all the sense in the world, because really he is to be fed this reasoning. And so we have at one point where Nicholas is talking to a girl and is to kind of hear this conversation between Danny and a girl in town. And this girl in town is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, no luck catching those killers. Like, have you? And Danny's like, well, I think it's just the one. So we go on and we have Nicholas, who is to have this whole entire story that is technically already mostly been like presented to us, figuring out how uh, how Simon was to go on and to have killed everybody because he has the most motive. So all of a sudden we have it where Simon is to turn around and say, it's like, well, here's the thing. Like, for every single one of those murders, like, I wasn't really there. Because guess what? Simon is to have all of these tapes of certain days where he, of course, is obviously to be in the store during all those times of death. And so, really, that gives Simon an alibi. And so he's like, God, so it's not this guy. So who is it then? So Nicholas is just going on, and he's just rattling his brain, and he just can't figure it out. And so we just consistently have it where Simon is just kind of like being spoon fed, like what's really going on here. Because if he can't figure it out, it seems like figuring out is going to just be a thing that is to just be given to him. So more and more, just Nicholas here wants to figure this whole thing out, and they just can't. So we then go on and have this kind of given to him, and so Nicholas is to realize that the culprits here are to have actually been like a lot of people within this whole town. And so Nicholas is to realize that everyone like had a piece of all these murders, because it seems like we had the one guy who they blew up his house is because like his house color isn't the same as everyone else's house, because I guess they were going with this rust style for this whole entire town, and so considering his house stuck out, people hated him, and so people wanted him dead. We had the one weird Tom guy, or the one, God, what is his name? We had the one guy that just hated the living statue guy. Yeah, Tom. He ended up killing him. And, like, that was the one thing that he had to just go on and boast about in this community meeting. That's like, now we can kind of concentrate on other things here. So, we go on, and really for the gardening girl, that was talk about what was all happening. Nicholas was to ask these guys, it's like, well, why kill her? Because she's moving on anyways. And it's like, well, if we can't have her, then no one else can. So I'm like, Nicholas is like, okay, this is so bizarre. And they killed Tim Messenger because it seemed like he was to go on and make all these like typing errors, and that he was spewing so much like tabloids and stuff like that, which like I guess it was just news that no one really liked, and so they might as well have killed him off. And so I'm trying to think if there's any like deaths that I didn't mention here. Um, no, I think that's about roughly it. Like I think um and I think Blower, they just killed him off because he was just a horrible actor and they just hated him. So we go on and we have these guys going and saying that this is like the greater good. And Nicholas is like, no, like this is not the greater good. You're just choosing to kill people and writing it off as some accident. So we have Inspector Frank, who is to arrive here and say that he is technically a part of this whole thing. And now Nicholas realizes that there's nothing he can do because even his superior is in on this. So Nicholas, of course, to realize that all he can do now is just to try to run away, as these guys are to all have these weapons here. And even Danny is just kind of forced to help out these people. And like Nicholas is like, oh my god, even you, Danny? And so we go on and we have Nicholas, who is to think that he can go on to London and send a ton of cops over here to arrest people. But then even like Nicholas is to realize how like stupid that sounds. And so Nicholas is like, well, no, like I'm gonna go on and like I'm gonna do this the old-fashioned way. I'm gonna do it the Wild West way. So Nicholas goes on and he decides to make his way back into town, and he just starts gunning everybody down. But with that said, like every single time, everyone just gets shot in the shoulder bizarrely. So that means like they're not gonna die. They're just gonna get shot in the shoulder consistently. None of the wounds that they really get are anything that is to kind of kill any number of these characters off, because really everybody mostly gets shot in the shoulder. So Nicholas comes gunslinging into the town and starts blowing everybody away. So Nicholas goes on and is to find like these certain characters and starts shooting them, and then he works his way up to the people at the bar and starts killing them, and is to go on and like have the doctor getting shot in the foot, and the Reverend is to say like, "Oh, why do we have to have this needless violence?" And so we go on and we have, of course, where there's no like persuading both Nicholas and Danny from continuing doing what they're doing. So the priest all of a sudden whips out these guns, and so they have to shoot the priest also. We had one moment where, of course, the Reverend was asking Nicholas if he would like to go to church and like say like a prayer and stuff like that at church. And Nicholas is like, well, that would be good and all if I really believed in going to church. And the Reverend's like, oh, like you're an atheist, are you? And Nicholas is like, well, no, there's a certain kind of belief, but like I'm just not open to really going to church. And so he's like, oh, well, you're this then. And it's like, and how can you cure that? As some jokes to be rattled off in the distance. So we go on and we have Nicholas who's consistently trying to find all these people and lighting them up. And so now we have it where Nicholas is to find Inspector Frank, and he's to have these two guns out. And so Frank goes on and is to shatter the chandelier. And we also had the moment where they go on and talk about these like hoodie kids and how they're doing all this like these crazy things in town, which all they do is just stand there. So we had at one point where Nicholas was hiring all these little hoodie guys to go on and spray paint all these cameras so no one can see what's going on. To where Tom, the neighborhood watch, is kind of blind now. So Frank is to go on and shoot this chandelier, and then he is to run off. And so, like, well, hey, we're gonna get back to him. We're gonna go on and get other people, and then we're gonna come back to him. So we go on and we have them continuing to just kind of like run through all these people, through the one girl who is to like do the crossword puzzles and the hotel, and we have Nicholas who calls her a hag again, and then takes her down. So all of this is to go on, and eventually like the big main thing is to really just kind of finish up with Simon here. And so Nicholas is to go on and meet Simon at this like weird like town display thing with all of these these little homes or whatever, as if it's like Godzilla and King Kong are battling here. So we have this fight out moment, and really what happens is that while they're fighting, Simon is all of a sudden, excuse me, is going on and is to have this box cutter, and he's to run to get to Nicholas, and Nicholas goes on and is to shove Simon into this one part of this house where he gets like spiked through the head, but he doesn't get exactly killed. He just kind of gets it like jabbed through his mouth, through the bottom of his like mouth. So he's like, man, this is so painful. So and he's really gonna need ice cream after that. So all of a sudden now, like that technically Simon is taken care of. Like they're still realizing it's like, well, like I think after that everything is all taken care of. But then they turn around and now we have like the Inspector Frank that they still have to deal with. And so we have at one point where Danny is to have to shoot his own father, but instead he goes on and does the Point Break thing where he shoots in the air. He's like, "Ma!" So we go on, and we of course have Nicholas who has to take down Frank because Danny can't, and so we do go on and have everybody at the end of this all get arrested and everybody is booked. And so, like, all these guys are filling out like this big, huge mountain of paperwork. And so, like, this all kind of ends with them, like, kind of all going on back to like a good day's work at the end of all this to kind of do their next day where they're going to go on and do like something really cool and they're going to get their next call. And so both Nicholas and Danny here are going to go on and like run off to their next adventure, which is to not be a sequel, sadly. But anyways, yeah, I think that's all that I wanted to go on and technically say here. Like, there could have been more moments that I could have talked about, like that whole grocery store battle where we consistently have it where all the other police officers are to make their way into this grocery store with their, like, riot gear, and Nicholas to go on and fight the big, like, receiving guy, the Michael Armstrong, because Armstrong, I think, was to go on and fight Nicholas in his apartment room, and he goes on and takes that guy down. And Simon is having this walkie talking to this guy saying like, well, hey, like, is Nicholas down? And we of course have Nicholas who's like yarp and narp. It's like, oh, okay. So we, and that's when Simon is kind of putting the pieces together, if not to say it's like, okay, well, it seems like there's a whole town connection here. So they go through the grocery store, and so we have it where all of a sudden we have these guys in the back who are consistently throwing these knives to the point where it seems that one of the guys got hit, but instead I think one of the, like, the ragu bottles busted, and they're like, "Ma, like I got hit with something," and so the guys are like, "Oh no, like my partner got hit." It's like, no, it's just some ragu thing. So at one point we go on and have these guys just take all these carts and are using it as some weird battling ram to go on and I guess try to, like, I don't know exactly what this really does. It doesn't really make sense. But they kind of ran this thing, and I guess they killed them off by doing that, or knocked them unconscious by hitting them with these big, huge amount of carts, which makes no sense. And so, yeah, so then after that, they kind of move on to bigger and better, or bigger and more threatening things. And I think eventually they go on and try to figure out where Simon is, and they continue to try to chase him down. So, with that said, I hope at that point that technically covers everything. If not, let me know in the comments below if there's something that I missed, because I'm sure there's a billion things that I probably did. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about Hot Fuzz, whether you liked this movie, whether you thought it was stupid. Maybe you much rather have liked movies like Shaun of the Dead, or Paul, or At World's End, or whichever heck else Simon Pegg movie, or Nick Frost movie that is out there at this point. Let me know in the comments below, whichever you'd like, because at the end of the day, I'm just going to say I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.